Thank you, everybody, for joining the webinar today. I think we're going to go ahead and get started now. So today's webinar is going to be about the ins and outs of cybersecurity insurance. Putting this on at Biz Tech. So if you're not familiar with Biz Tech, we are an IT provider. We are a managed service provider that works with small to medium businesses, usually trying to manage, support, and streamline their IT. So whether you have an internal IT department or you have no IT department, we are going to be that IT department for you. But today we have a few experts that are going to join us here. We have Garrett Droege from TechAssure and Jay Roberts from Wade Associates. So gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you now.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks to Biz Tech for having us on today. Today we're going to talk about the ins and outs of cyber insurance and try and hopefully educate a little bit and dispel some myths about cyber insurance. My name is Garrett Droege. I am the Executive Director of TechAssure. And TechAssure is a global network of insurance brokers that specialize in technology and cyber risks. We've been around since 2000, really since the .com era, and our members are all true specialists. So they've been working with cyber risks literally since cyber risk was a thing. So we're 34 corporate members globally with several thousand individuals within our network. Just under $10 billion in annual premium placements, so pretty sizable in this space especially. And we are the only tech and cyber broker network in the world. So we're really happy to be here with you today. And as luck would have it, we have a local member here in the Greater Charlotte region, Wade Associates, and they've generously agreed to donate the content to today's meeting. And we have with us Jay Roberts from Wade Associates. He's in their innovation risk practice group. And Jay is a really knowledgeable broker on all things tech and cyber risk. And so I think you're in for a treat with today's presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over to Jay.
Awesome. Thanks, Garrett. I appreciate that. And thanks to Biz Technology for allowing me to be a part of this. Really excited to be here. That's me, obviously, picture. That's our office there. We're located in downtown Davidson, right across the street from Flatiron. For any of you locals, may drive through the area, feel free to stop by whenever you like. But we've been around for quite some time and certainly spend a lot of time focusing on cyber. So today we're going to jump right into it. We are talking about the ins and outs of cyber insurance. We're going to hit a variety of different topics here to truly take you through the ins and outs of cyber insurance. And hopefully by the end, you'll have a more confident understanding about this topic, but more importantly, be in a position to make better, more informed decisions about purchasing cyber insurance. And I think the best place to start when talking about cyber is to get an idea about where it came from and how it evolved. And I've got a little timeline here, and we're not even going to go back that long, just to 2010, 10 years ago. I want to share a personal perspective on how I've seen cyber evolve. But Garrett, TechAssure has been around for quite some time and has been dealing with cyber risks long before, as you said, cyber ever became a thing. Do you want to give just a quick perspective of the cyber market prior to 2010?
Yeah, sure, Jay. Yeah, you're right. We're talking about a really juvenile insurance market. It's easily the youngest insurance market, and that's why it's evolving so quickly. Even going back to 2010, a lot of times it wasn't even called cyber insurance. You've heard cyber liability insurance, cybersecurity insurance. Cyber insurance is really the best catch-all phrase for the product as it exists now, because you're not just talking about cybersecurity or cyber liability. TechAssure has been around since 2000, when cyber was more often found in a technology errors and omissions policy. And so that's where it evolved from the tech industry. And then as businesses became more and more technology enabled, which I'd argue every business today is enabled by technology in to some degree, if not to a great degree, that's when cyber insurance became really essential for every business, every industry vertical, not just the tech sector.
Yeah, and there's some good points there. And when I get to, 2010 is about the time when I got into the insurance industry. And I can tell you just from a personal perspective, cyber wasn't really still a thing yet. There were options out there. You could find options if you really needed to, but they were far and few in between. State privacy laws did exist at that time, but they weren't very common, nor were they strict for that matter. But carriers nonetheless knew that this was a trend, a big trend, and they needed to have options to provide to their policyholders when they needed it. So they started coming out with these endorsements, right? Just add on policies per se that you could endorse to your existing commercial insurance policies, and they were very limited in coverage. They gave you maybe $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 worth of coverage, nothing anywhere near the amount that you would need in a true cyber incident. But that was their way of testing the market, right? They wanted to understand what the risks were, what the costs were when a cyber incident occurs, so on and so forth. State privacy laws then started becoming more common, and that spurred a lot of contractual requirements. So businesses, if they wanted to do business with somebody else, was requiring that they carried cyber insurance. And that really spurred the need for the insurance market to come out with truly full-fledged policy options for their clients. And I remember there was a point in time where literally every week it became an inside joke within our agency, who's going to come out with a cyber insurance policy this week? What are they going to call it? What is it going to look like? But nonetheless, it has certainly evolved exponentially to now. Today, cyber has become an absolute pillar of any solid insurance program. And to give you some idea as to what the marketplace looks like today, well, there's over 100 different options, which started, again, just a couple of years ago as just a handful. So now there are an abundance of options out there, but still only a portion of businesses are buying cyber insurance, about 20% of the market. And that number is increasing year after year. And as new privacy laws come into play, as regulatory bodies become more strict about cybersecurity, that number is only going to go up. The premiums for cyber have been relatively stable the last couple of years. So it's not uncommon to see what we call a flat renewal, right? So you pay X 1 year when your policy renews. It's going to be roughly the same. That's probably going to go away. We're going to anticipate premiums going up. Underwriting requirements are going to become more strict, but nonetheless something that we are continuously monitoring, and it's fascinating to see. But as it relates to cyber insurance specifically, right, who needs cyber? And the short answer to that is honestly everyone. Cyber impacts everybody. It doesn't matter how big you are, where you're located, what industry you're in. If you use the internet in any way, you are at risk of having a cyber incident. And for a lot of people, that's still hard to accept. There are people who've been around for 30 years. This has never been a thing. This wasn't a thing when they first started their business, and they just don't see it as a risk. And with that comes some common misconceptions about cyber insurance. Probably the most common is, I don't see myself as a target for hackers, right? I'm just a family business. We've been around, we've had no problems. I don't have anything special. Why would anybody want to target me? And there's two parts to this question that I really want to address real quickly. First of all, hackers aren't targeting businesses, okay? It's not like they're waking up in the morning, they're eating their breakfast, they hop in their car, they drive around town looking for the next business to deploy a cyber attack on. That's just not happening. That's just too much work. And if that truly was the case, hackers probably wouldn't be a thing because they just wouldn't go through that. Instead, though, hackers have technology readily available at their fingertips that they can use to more efficiently identify their subjects. For example, they may use an IP scanner, which can literally scan millions of addresses per second. And when that scanner identifies an IP address with some sort of vulnerability or weakness, that address gets flagged. And it's only then when they take a closer look as to what's going on, what's the weakness, who is this business, do they realize who that person is. Not to mention, though, hackers represent only a small portion of all of the types of cyber incidents. It's only about 20 or 25%. Ironically, the majority of cyber claims stem from internal human error. So it's people clicking bad email links, they're opening infected attachments, they're losing their phones and laptops or having them stolen. They're getting duped by social engineering scams. And the other side of this statement is being a small business, right? We all hear about the big businesses in the news having a cyber attack or having a cyber incident. We don't hear enough about the smaller organizations. And that's because those bigger businesses are impacting more people. So people need to know about those events. Another common misconception is, we don't take credit cards and we don't store any information. So do we have a risk? Do we still need it? And the answer is yes. Taking credit cards and storing information, those aren't the only cyber risks. If you rely on computers to conduct your business and they're compromised by a virus or malware, and you can't continue operations because you can't use your computer, you could face a business interruption loss. And if that virus destroys your computer systems, cyber can provide the cost to restore or rebuild those systems. If you transfer funds electronically, you're at risk of a social engineering scam. So the point is, these are not the only cyber risks, okay? Now, when we talk about claims, I want to share some statistics from Net Diligence, which is the premier authority who provides cyber risk readiness services. They aggregate cyber claims data from insurance companies every year, and they put together this report. And it's a pretty awesome, comprehensive report. But this shows who is at the most risk. And for the 6th year in a row, they found that the vast majority of cyber claims are made by small and mid-sized companies. And it's not a coincidence. A lot of smaller companies don't have the sophistication or the resources, the training, the funding, or even the motivation sometimes to truly be proactive about fighting and preventing cybercrime. And as a result, they're more likely to have vulnerabilities that are easy to detect and thus more likely to suffer a cyber claim. The industry sectors on the right represent those with the highest frequency of claims. Do note, though, that if you are in an industry that's not listed here, like construction, social service, education, okay, that doesn't mean you're not at risk. Everybody is still at risk. This, again, just represents those who have the most frequency with cyber claims. Healthcare, because of the type of data that they are associated with, protected health information, PHI. Retail operations, the sheer volume of people inside retail stores swiping their credit cards every day, financial services, obviously bank account information, tax information, so on and so forth. And manufacturing is an interesting industry that's certainly climbed the rankings as far as the claims frequency here, but this is an industry that represents operational risk. Just like many other industries, manufacturing has become highly technologically advanced with their manufacturing processes. They are running very large, sophisticated, and complex production lines all off of computers using the internet. And if those systems go down, they can't continue to run their production line. So they're facing a serious business interruption claim. So if we look at actually what happens when a cyber incident occurs, I think this is a good illustration to show what unfolds. Obviously, there is the discovery of an event. And one of the first things you probably need to do is to consult with legal counsel. And oftentimes today, these people are referred to as breach coaches. right? They're going to help you navigate the ins and outs of the legal responsibilities you have with dealing with this incident. Take notification costs, for example. You may have customers who don't live in your state. Let's say we've got a North Carolina business, but customers from outside North Carolina come and conduct business with you. The way that you notify a customer in Virginia may be completely different than how you notify someone who lives in New Hampshire. And these are legalities that you must be able to appropriately navigate. And a breach coach can help you do that. Forensics investigation is another big one. So you want to have an individual who is specialized and has the ability and expertise to dissect and navigate through your network. They're going to try to identify the origin of the incident. When did the incident occur? What data was taken? Was any data compromised? They're going to try to preserve the evidence. And most importantly, they're going to help you identify ways to prevent further damage. But you can look at this yourself and see down the line how things can unfold. And it's a lot. It's a very cumbersome process and filled with a lot of responsibilities. But if we were to take all of these incidents and attach some monetary value to them, you can see just how quickly a cyber incident spirals out of control. So again, net diligence here, breaking down what the average costs are in the various categories. And mind you, this is just for small businesses. You add these things up and you're looking at an incident that costs over $800,000. I want to point out business interruption. Business interruption is skewed a little bit higher than these other cost categories because ransomware falls into that business interruption category. Obviously, if you experience a ransomware attack, you're basically at a dead end. You can't do anything. Your systems are locked up and you can't do anything. So ransomware is a very hot topic right now. In fact, just last year, ransomware officially became the #1 cause of a cyber incident. And as you can see by this graph, the ransomware claims are constantly rising, not only in frequency, but in severity as well. It's certainly not uncommon to hear about ransom demands today that are in the millions of dollars. You know, just looking at what an average ransomware cost back in 2018, we're talking about a couple $1,000s. Last year was tens of thousands of dollars, and now we've eclipsed 6 figures. But the costs are going up dramatically, not only because ransomware is one of the easiest attacks to deploy, but insurance policies are paying the claims, which makes ransomware a key coverage item you should incorporate in your cyber insurance policy. And on that note of coverage, I do want to point out another common misconception in that people tend to believe that they have cyber coverage included in their other commercial insurance policies. And that's just not true. I won't read through all of these items. You can sort of take a look at that on your own, and I'm sure we can provide a copy of the slide deck for any of those who want to take a more closer look. But these policies have been around for decades and decades, and they were never designed to cover the risks associated with cyber. That is why cyber exists. Okay, it is specifically designed to cover those incidents, which leads us to sort of looking through how a cyber insurance policy is designed and the coverage options that you can get. So cyber is made up of different insuring agreements. Insuring agreements are essentially just a contractual promise from the insurance company that says they will pay for claims if XYZ happens. What makes cyber so different from all other commercial insurance policies is that it is a completely modular policy, meaning that you pick and choose different insuring agreements and you build that policy around your unique exposures and needs. Okay, it's not like a general liability policy or a personal auto policy where when you buy it, you have a good idea as to what you're buying. All of those policies are standardized, they are pre-packaged, and there's only very subtle differences from carrier to carrier that are pretty easy to navigate. Cyber, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. There is no standardized cyber insurance policy, and that's what creates a lot of confusion when navigating and understanding what a cyber policy covers. We talked about how insurance companies came out with their own cyber policies, and so there's over 100 options right now in the market, and every single option is different. The terminology is different. How insurance companies define cyber is different. The deductible structures, the limits, the sublimits, it is all different. and I can't stress that enough. So what I've got listed here on this slide represents just some basic insuring agreements that you can find in a cyber policy, but just keep in mind, just because they're listed here doesn't mean that they come with every insurance policy, okay? We have a list through TechAssure of, I think it's about 35 different coverage enhancements that you can add to a cyber policy that doesn't just automatically come with it. So it's critically important that you carefully review the policy language and the terms and conditions to truly understand the scope of coverage that you have within your policy. And a good experienced broker can help you navigate all of those nuances. But to put into perspective where these differences come from and what those differences look like, this is a very brief sampling of some of the things that vary widely from policy to policy. So take the business-owned devices versus employee-owned devices. Okay, this is actually a hot topic right now amidst COVID-19 and this whole pandemic. You've got a lot of employees who are now working from home, who have never worked at home before. And so as a result, they are having to use their own personal computers to tap into their company's network so that they can conduct business remotely. But personal computers aren't typically equipped with robust cyber hygiene controls like most business computers are. So personal computers can introduce new network vulnerabilities and access points. And there are some policies that will exclude coverage for claims arising from a compromised personal device that's owned by employees. These nuances exist all over the place. Prior acts is another big one. Prior acts is coverage for a claim that occurs prior to you buying the cyber insurance policy. And this is a big deal because since cyber is still a relatively new line of insurance, people are buying cyber for their first time. But here's something that many people may not know. The average time that it takes to discover that you've actually had a breach is 197 days, and that comes from the Pohman Institute. So the point is, you may be notified that you have a cyber incident, but when those forensics investigators get involved and they start dissecting your network, they may very well say and be able to point out that this incident actually occurred 6 months ago. So if you buy your cyber insurance policy today, and a couple weeks later you're notified that you might have a problem, it's then determined that the actual incident occurred 6 months ago. Without prior acts coverage, your policy won't respond. So we highly advise that those who buy cyber avoid policies who do not provide prior acts coverage. Those are just two nuances that really sort of put into perspective how different policies are in the marketplace. So it's incredibly important to review the policy terms and conditions to understand your scope of coverage. Now, those who are looking to buy insurance, cyber insurance for the first time, there's two ways you can go about doing that. All right, so the first would be through an endorsement. This was what we talked about a little bit earlier when insurance companies were first coming out with cyber insurance options. They were just bolting on some cyber coverage to whatever commercial insurance policy you had at that time. The coverage is very limited. The limits are very small. It is going to do nothing for you in the event of a true cyber incident. On the other hand, you can buy a full standalone policy, which is what we highly recommend. Buying a standalone cyber policy gives you the flexibility to design it as your company needs it. It puts you in the driver's seat, and you're going to have much broader coverage options and much larger limits to play with. Now, what are some of the things that an insurance company may want to know? So in the underwriting process, there's some common questions that you'll be asked. First of all, what industry are you in? Is this an industry that is more prone to filing a cyber insurance claim? So industry is a big one. Revenue provides some idea about the exposure from a business interruption loss. So if you're doing $1 million a month in revenue, for example, one cyber incident could last a month, right, before everything is back online and running and back to normal, right? So there's $1 million potentially right there in business interruption loss. Number of records is important because you got to know how many people you might have to notify once a cyber incident occurs. Types of data is also really important. So do you have protected health information? Do you have payment card information from collecting credit cards? What sorts of data are you responsible for? Because that's going to provide some guidance as to what regulatory bodies might get involved if you have a cyber incident. Obviously, if you're in healthcare, HIPAA is going to be a big one. And then the insurance company is going to want to know, what controls do you have in place? What are you doing to prevent cyber incidents from happening? Now, you can't completely prevent it, but you can do a lot of things to greatly reduce the likelihood of a cyber incident. And this is where we like to spend a lot of our efforts, because sure, you can buy a cyber insurance policy, but that doesn't do anything as far as reducing the likelihood of having an incident. So some of the key controls that a business can install to make themselves more attractive to underwriters, right? Because at the end of the day, you are negotiating. You are transferring risk to the insurance company via an insurance contract in exchange for a premium. The more risk that you transfer to the insurance company, the more premium that you're going to pay. So some of the things that businesses can do to really protect themselves from having a cyber incident is to do a risk assessment, right? Evaluate how effective your current risk management strategies are at preventing cyber incidents, right? Using analytics and calculators to quantify what your true exposure is to cyber incidents and what the potential costs are, which can also be helpful in determining what limits you buy on your cyber policy. Providing employee training to combat social engineering scams is a big one, right? Because as I said, a lot of cyber incidents stem from people just making mistakes or not knowing that they can't do certain things or open certain attachments, or know that you can hover over a link in an email and in the bottom left, you can see what web address that link will take you to. And so you can find red flags there. Due diligence in your vendors. So reviewing the contracts that you have with your vendors, because it's certainly not uncommon for certain vendor contracts to shift the financial responsibilities back to you, even though they may be negligent and responsible for somebody getting hands on your information. And then last but not least, something that I think is really, really important and just not executed nearly enough is to have a breach response plan. Having a breach response plan is absolutely critical, because when a cyber incident occurs, the clock starts ticking. You need to have a very clear direction as to who you're going to contact to help you with all of the events that you're going to need help with. First of all, that breach coach. Do you know what breach coach you're going to call when you have a cyber incident? Do you know what forensics investigator you're going to have? Do you know what public relations person you call? These are things that you as a business can put in order prior to that cyber incident. So when it does happen, you can jump immediately into action. The sooner you get a grip on the situation, the faster you can resolve it and the less expensive that situation will be. And to sort of wrap everything up here, a big common question is, how much does cyber cost? And this is a graph here that we put together based on some proprietary TechAssure data. So we take key metrics from our clients who buy cyber, right? What industry are they in? How much are they paying for it? What are their revenues? What are their limits? And we compiled this data here so you can get an idea as to what a cyber insurance costs based on a revenue band and limit. But at the end of the day, cyber is not as expensive as most people think. It's actually a very affordable policy given the sheer scope of coverage that is afforded in a cyber policy. So in closing, one thing I also want people to take away, buying cyber is not just buying a policy. You're actually buying access to a plethora of resources, fully vetted team of professionals that will be by your side once you have an incident so that you're not alone. And I think that's where the real value in cyber insurance comes from, unlike other policies that just don't afford that many resources. But with that being said, that really wraps up this presentation. The key takeaways I hope you get from this presentation is, one, cyber impacts everyone. Doesn't matter your size, location, or industry. It is not a standardized policy. What you have could vary widely from something your peers have or something that you might get from another insurance company. So it's very critical to review what you have. And buying cyber is more than just buying a policy. It is buying access to resources. So with that, that wraps up today. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention. It was a pleasure being a part of this. With that, I think, Garrett, I'll throw this back to you. If we have any questions that came through or that I missed, now's the time for some Q&A.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, which means you did a good job explaining everything. So thanks, Jay. And Jay's contact information is right there for anyone that has questions. And I'll add this before we close, that this is an insurance policy that really does require some finesse and some technical knowledge. So working with a broker like Jay or one of his teammates, TechAssure members, is really advisable, simply because there's so many errors that can happen when putting one of these programs together. They're really new products, not well understood by most insurance brokers, and there's a lot of pitfalls. So this webinar wasn't meant to scare anyone. It was really meant to illuminate the cyber insurance marketplace, how it works, and hopefully you got some better insights into cyber insurance after today. So with that, turn things over back to Biz Tech, and thanks again for having us.
So we are offering a complimentary dark web scan. And the reason this is important is because there's probably information for your business that's kind of out there on the dark web. And so we use a service that kind of scours the different forums and stuff that are out there, looking for credentials relating to your company's domain. And we can kind of provide that list. And we've seen some that are old as like 2012 or 2013, I think, when they had the LinkedIn breach, and some of the newer stuff too. Like last year, they had collection number 1, which was a huge. It was like 700 some million different credentials that were leaked. And the reason that's important too is because we kind of touched on ransomware and how that's kind of the most popular one now. And if somebody is able to go on the dark web and find credentials for one of your companies, like even if it's not for, let's say, Office 365 that your business is using, if they were able to take credentials from that LinkedIn breach and that user is still using the same password across both sites, because people aren't very good with passwords, they could very easily take those credentials, gain access to Office 365. And that's kind of one of the biggest things we've been seeing lately is no longer are they trying to send ransomware through, just kind of spammed out emails, whether it be from a random Gmail address or something, but they're actually gaining access to trustable domains and then going to those people's contacts and just sending out a link to maybe even a Dropbox or OneDrive account. And the reason that's kind of important for us like trying to stop is because, again, if it's a contact that you have, they're going to trust that email a little bit more. And if you're sending it from a trustworthy service like something like OneDrive or SharePoint or Dropbox, then somebody's going to be more likely to click it too. So we definitely recommend kind of making sure that you don't have a whole lot of information out there, and then we can offer some advanced security to kind of help protect those. So we do include user security with our IT360 offering, and then we also have an endpoint and network security offerings. Protecting the endpoints and all the PCs in your network, and then also along the network side, just kind of monitoring all the traffic that takes place there. So those are advanced security offerings, and if you're interested in any of those, you can go to that link and sign up for the dark web scan. Otherwise, you can send an email to info@biztechnologysolutions.com, and we're more than happy to talk to you about the advanced security stuff. And then just kind of a sales pitch on our next webinar on June 12th, which we're going to touch on the kind of managing risk with the new remote workforce that everybody's kind of moving to.